Hey guys, today we're taking a shot at understanding the effect of aperture and focal length on depth of field and what are some cool effects we can get by playing with it. Show your support by liking this video, subscribe if you're not already, and maybe by playing this video to our grandma. It's about time she learned all about depth of field, don't you think so? Okay, let's talk about depth of field. Spoiler alert, it has to do a lot with bokeh. Back in the days, people somehow realized that you could see the projection of an upside down image on the wall opposite a tiny hole in the wall. And this actually led to the invention of the pinhole camera. It's called a camera obscura or pinhole image, and it's a natural optical phenomenon. It was mentioned around 500 years AD in Aristotle's Problems, and about the same time in the Chinese Mozi or Mozi, I don't know how that's pronounced, the Chinese Mozi text. The first known description of pinhole photography is found in the stereoscope written in 1856 by David Brewster, a Scottish inventor. But I actually guess that if you wanted to hear all those boring details, you'd be on Wikipedia and not watching my pretty face talk right now. So what is depth of field? Depth of field is the distance in front of or behind the object that still looks sharp enough, still looks in focus. It actually depends on two things. The first one is the amount of light hitting the sensor, or your retina for that matter, which is aperture basically, and the second one is the magnifying power of your lens or the focal length. Okay, let's talk about aperture. The eye does that automatically, but the photographer can control the amount of light hitting the sensor by increasing or decreasing the aperture. And this is known as the f-stop. Here it gets a bit tricky because the larger f-stop number actually means a smaller aperture. And with larger camera aperture you get worse depth of field. Mind that this is scientifically worse, which means it's narrower. Usually that's exactly what we look for in an image. Bokeh. Bokeh comes from the Japanese word for blur or haze and is explained as the way the camera renders out the focus points of light. At small apertures like let's say f22, and remember larger f-stop number means smaller aperture. At a small aperture, light from the focused object is bent over quite small or acute angles, and when the aperture is very small, admitted light is highly collimated, which is actually what snobs used to say, that light rays are parallel to each other. Hence you get a sharp focus for all incoming light. But at larger apertures, say f1.4, more of the lens area is exposed and light from object enters the camera over a wider range of angles. To clarify that a bit, let's see how does focus work. A camera lens is designed to focus accurately at only one point or one distance. Things closely in front or behind the focus object may still appear sharp to the human eye, but as this distance increases, the appearance of foreground or background objects becomes increasingly fuzzy. And this fuzzy or blurry spot is called the circle of confusion. Bending light over larger angles, open aperture, makes the circle of confusion larger and ultimately produces more bokeh. Same with our eyes. You can see much better in daylight than during the night, and that's why we squint when we want to focus better, to try and adjust the aperture manually. The interesting point is that the human eye actually goes from f8 to f2, which is not that much, but where we excel at is ISO performance. Apparently our brains are much better than a camera sensor in this regard, and to us use previously stored information to improve the picture that our brains trick us to see. Basically, if the aperture is infinitely small, then only central light rays can pass and we have an infinite depth of field no matter what. Every point, no matter the distance, is represented as a point on the image. And this is actually how a pinhole camera works. And the other thing affecting depth of field is the focal length of the camera. The human eye has a focal length of about 50mm. That's why images taken at 50mm focal length are considered more appealing, because they resemble the closest to what we actually see. However, our eyes grow over our life, so this focal change actually changes over our lifespan. And this is why you can always see older people reading their newspaper with their hands a bit more extended. Or, I don't know, maybe iPads? I don't know. Does anyone still read newspapers? Okay, I almost forgot. Another way to change the depth of field is to actually control the distance between the subject and the lens. And the closer the subject is to the lens, this will provide for a shallower depth of field. But this is not an ideal way, because it would require us to change our composition, which is almost never desirable. To recap, depth of field indicates the interval of distance in which the image appears sharp or on focus. When you reduce aperture, the light cone narrows. This means that you would observe the confusion circles getting smaller. Hence, the range of distances where there's focus increases. Okay, let's sum it up. Manipulating depth of field is one of the best ways to change the whole appearance of your video. Changing the aperture is the best way to do that without messing with your composition. If you're taking photos, you can compensate the aperture change with change to shutter speed. But if we're talking about video, this is not always a viable option, since usually shutter speed would follow the frame rate. And therefore we can only play around with the ISO. Thankfully, we can get away with much higher ISO and still get pretty nice video quality. Thank you for watching this video. I really hope it was useful and shed some light on the way our craft works. Really try to keep it brief and simplified, so I hope I didn't mislead you or misinform you. Please like this video if you found it entertaining or informing or whatever, and don't forget to subscribe if you're not already. And see you next time!